Hi, everybody. A very warm welcome from CRASH in Cambridge. I'm Joanna Page. I'm the director of CRASH. Also with us is Zainab Akhtar, who's our fellowships coordinator at CRASH. We're also very much hoping to be joined online by a couple of fellows who were with us last year. We're just struggling a little bit with connection issues, but hopefully they'll be able to join us later on in this webinar. And the purpose of this is to explain a little bit about CRASH and our program and the Visiting Fellowships for Scholars from the Global South. So for those of you who are not familiar with CRASH, we're an interdisciplinary centre based at the University of Cambridge, and we focus on research in the arts, humanities and social sciences. And CRASH provides a home for several research centres and also for workers, researchers working on individual or collaborative projects. And we also host visiting scholars, and they might stay with us for a term or up to a year, sometimes even longer. We run several research networks and a very extensive events programme. So in total, CRASH and the centres that we host organise around 300 events every year. And so there's always a lot going on here, plenty of opportunities to meet people at CRASH, also in other departments or visitors from other parts of the world. So as I said, our aim in this webinar is to introduce one of the fellowship programmes that we run, the Visiting Fellowships for Scholars from the Global South. And this programme is only in its second year. It's still relatively new. And I'm going to ask if they're able to connect a couple of our fellows from the first cohort last year to talk a little bit about their experience with us at CRASH and what they found most beneficial about their time here, any advice that they might want to pass on to you as potential applicants. I'm then going to turn to some more practical details on how to apply, the selection process, how that works. And I'll also talk a bit about what we're looking for in applicants. Then after that, we're going to open up for any questions that you might have about the application process or about what it's like to be a fellow at CRASH. So please click on the Q&A button at the bottom, add your questions. You can do that at any stage during the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer them all at the end. So first of all, what is the Visiting Fellowship Programme for Scholars from the Global South at CRASH? What's its aim? How does it work? So these fellowships are for scholars in the Global South who would like to spend time at Cambridge for research purposes. As we all know, I'm sure the Global South is an inadequate, sometimes even a contentious name, but we've chosen to use it because it's one of the best ways we have practically of identifying countries where many researchers may not be able to access funds to travel abroad for research. To apply for this fellowship scheme, you must be currently employed at a higher education institution in one of the countries listed by the OECD as receiving official development assistance. If you look on our website, there's a link to that list so that you can check if you need to. The other important eligibility criterion is that you need to have been awarded your PhD at least 5 years ago. At the moment, we have funding to invite 3 scholars every year under this scheme to spend a term or about 9 weeks in Cambridge between mid-January and mid-March. You might have different reasons for wanting to come to CRASH. You might want to meet people here to exchange ideas with them, or to use some of the libraries or collections that we have in Cambridge. Or you might benefit from spending time in a centre that's very interdisciplinary to encounter different methods, different approaches. And most people feel that this is a great place to work, particularly when you're able to leave behind the commitments that you normally have at home and focus just on your research. Each year we have a different theme, and we partner with a different department or faculty in the university. This is so that when fellows come, they'll actually have at least 2 academic homes and 2 places to start making contacts. The theme is specific enough to mean that you should have interests in common with the other scholars that are selected that year. But it's also broad enough that people from a lot of different disciplines could apply. And we ask the 3 fellows who are selected each year to work together on a collaborative event to present their research. And of course, they organise that with full support from us. One of the things we were very keen to do when we set up the scheme is to bring fellows here from different regions at the same time. And this means that you'll be able to extend your network, not just with people at Cambridge or in the UK, but also with researchers working on similar topics, working in other regions of the world. So what do we provide if you are selected as a fellow? Well, we can cover your travel and your visa costs. We also arrange and pay for single accommodation in one of the colleges of the university. And we give you a small allowance to help with the cost of food and local travel. We'll also, of course, give you a desk at CRASSH, IT support, and access to the university's libraries and collections. Then when you very sadly leave at the end of your visit, you'll have a 9-month digital fellowship. And that means you'll be able to hold on to your email address and your access to the university's digital collections, such as ebooks and journal articles for the rest of the year. So to give you a better sense of what it's like to be here as a fellow, I wonder, Swati, thank you very much for joining us. Hello. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what it's like to be a fellow at CRASSH. I should clarify that I have no idea what Swati is about to say. It may not even be positive. That's also absolutely fine. I'm going to encourage her to be as truthful as possible. For example, she's probably going to tell you that it's extremely cold in Cambridge in January.
I was going to start with that. Hi, Joanna. It's so lovely to meet you, howsoever virtually. Am I audible more or less? Just set up the mic. Okay. Hi, Zainab. Thank you so much for
Hello.
your help. And hello to everybody here. So my experience, it is very cold in Cambridge, and I'm told it's worse this year, apparently. So I'm very glad I was there the previous year and not right now. So what I had expected out of the CRASSH Fellowship, as I'd written to Joanna early itself, is that I was hoping to have some time to myself outside of my administrative responsibilities, of which I have many, alongside teaching responsibilities, to dedicate a chunk of time simply to research. And that is something that CRASH provided me with. I'd asked for a desk of my own, and I did get a desk of my own. So it was a very, very productive 3 months for me. I was also able to use Cambridge's fabulous library collections, as well as access and this was despite the chaos that was going on at the British Library at that point of time. I was also able to visit the universities of Manchester and St. Andrews for personal academic visits and talks, etc., deepening connections with scholars in the UK outside of Cambridge as well. So all of this was made possible with the fellowship, which was a rather eventful period. And I don't know how the time passed, honestly. So that's something I would say that it's something to look forward to. In terms of things that one does not necessarily always prepare for, I'd say that if the fellows are anywhere close to me in age or older, get prepared to eat student food all over again, which many of you may have maybe out of practice with. I'd also ask you to keep in mind that Cambridge time, and that while, of course, the Wolfson Library remains open 24/7, you might need to get used to a little bit to dining hall times when most of the shops close. If get used to the idea of using Deliveroo, etc. I think this is something that you'll get used to as you spend a little bit of time there. Do be prepared for the fact that the United Kingdom has might be more expensive, especially given to in comparison to our respective currencies, and that's something that takes some getting used to. I was also not expecting Cambridge to be completely cashless. as it mostly is. So please be prepared for that. Do not carry a lot of cash. It's very difficult to get change for it. Though again, some amount of cash is probably not a bad idea. So these are a few things that I wasn't really expecting and had to get used to. So that's probably these are really little practical things that helps you get by on an everyday basis as opposed to anything else. Really, I had a very productive time. Joanna, I'm very proud to say that I've just sent off the essay which I was writing. It went through a couple of rounds of edits, of course. So I've just sent it off and let's see what comes of it. But it's done at least. So yeah, in terms of academics, in terms of the contacts I've made, as well as the fruitful friendships I've built with both the members of my cohort as well as other students and scholars in Cambridge. I don't think there's really much to be said about that because, that was fantastic. And it is, of course, it was a wonderful time that I had. With other fellows at CRASH as well. CRASH provides you with a very interesting academic community, which I think over the course of the term provided insights into a lot of scholarship that I don't normally engage with, and that I found again very stimulating. And finally, I think the experience of walking around Cambridge is also quite lovely. And I hope, despite the weather, it's something that you will make the most of because I think it's quite the experience watching the flowers bloom eventually. Yeah. So that's about it. That's all I have to say. And of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Swati. That's a lovely mix of academic and practical issues, which I'm sure a lot of people will have questions about. And I'm happy to report that the sun is almost out at the moment. And actually, the weather forecast this week is predicted to be really good. So that's something at least. And yeah, congratulations on that submission. All the best with that. Thank you very much. Victoria, fantastic to see you online. Great that you were able to connect. Yeah, would you like to just share a little bit about your experience with our listeners?
Yes, thank you, Joanna. It's good to see you again. Good afternoon, everyone from here, Nigeria. I had a very lovely time while at Crash, and what stood out for me the most is the productivity that the environment encouraged. I mean, you have a very nice space to work. Everything is working fine. The internet facility is very good. I had access to the library, and of course, the people are warm, welcoming, and they are always ready to help. I think that was something that really helped a lot. And of course, Joanna is always ready to help assist with as much as you wanted her to do. So I think that it's something like just like Swati said, it's something to look forward to. It's a very beautiful experience. You get to experience the town too. Cambridge is a lovely place to be. Yeah, yeah. You get to experience the college system, which many universities, maybe in some countries, do not have. And like Swati said too, the dining time, going to the cafeteria and all of this. Those are things you may not expect that you really have to get used to. I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that I didn't have to do much other than to do research. I mean, it was a much needed break for me, and I enjoyed the fact that I could do just the research, and I was also able to work on a proposal from scratch. You can imagine that. Apart from what I did with the Global South Fellowship, I was able to work with on a proposal. Unfortunately, I didn't get the fellowship, but it was a nice thing that I was able to start the proposal, and I'm still pushing it around. I believe that the proposal will probably win something very soon. So it's actually a place to be, honestly. Very productive time. Get to meet people too. I'm still in contact with some people that I met there. And of course, I was invited by um, I just his name just So it's a nice place to meet people. And of course, I should also mention the research practice seminar. It's quite engaging. I enjoyed listening to people from different fields share their research, their work on paper, and of course, it's good to just hear how research goes in different fields, and you're able to contribute from your perspective. So it's a beautiful thing to be at Crash, I must say. And the weather, it's very cold. It could be very cold in Cambridge, and I just like Swati said, it's not much colder this year. So if you're going to be going, you should prepare your warm clothes. And yeah, I'm hoping to answering questions if you have any questions. I think that's just about what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, all very interesting and very helpful to hear. And yeah, actually, both of you picked up on something that I hadn't mentioned very much before, is that accommodation in the college, it's Wolfson College in this case, of course, also means belonging to a college community. So you can meet people from the college, and yes, there are dining hall times. I should stress that you don't have to eat in college, but it's a good way of meeting people. And yeah, the food is often quite economical. So lots of people choose to do that. Thank you very much. And yes, we'll come back to you. I'm sure people will have questions for you at the end. So I wanted to give a few details on how to apply if you're interested in applying for the fellowship. So everything you need to submit is listed on our website, but I thought I would take this opportunity to just explain a little bit more about what we're hoping to find in applications. So first of all, we've tried to keep the application process as simple as possible. We know that applications can take a long time. We also know that you're very busy with teaching and a lot of other commitments. So aside from the usual personal details, the application just consists of a CV, which should include a list of publications, and 3 questions. The first one asks you why you wish to apply for this visiting fellowship. And here we're simply interested to know more about why you would like to come here. There's no right answer, but of course we're keen to see that you have done some research on the kind of libraries or archives that you might want to use here, or the researchers that you would like to meet, or perhaps some events that you would like to take part in. The next question asks for an outline of your research project. This is a really important part of the application, and this needs to be as detailed as possible. But also remember that your application will be read by people from very different disciplines. So it's really important to explain the significance of your work and what contribution it makes to your field. And you should also explain how this project leads on from your earlier work, particularly if that isn't clear from your CV. Or explain why you're taking a new direction. And then the third and final question asks you about your ideas for a joint event that will be held with the other scholars selected that year. And this question is given less weight in the selection process, but we're interested in hearing your ideas, particularly if you have imaginative proposals around different formats, for example. And of course, we understand that you won't yet know the context or what's possible. One application we had in the first year suggested an informal picnic in February, which sounded like a lovely idea, but also told us that the applicant had clearly never visited the UK in February when it's extremely cold. But of course, they weren't disadvantaged by that answer at all, because we really liked the idea of combining a social event with an academic one. So hopefully that will have given you some pointers on how to approach those 3 questions. But what about the rest of the application? How do we evaluate that? So the most important thing to say here is that we're looking for academic excellence and high potential. This can be evident in your CV and your research proposal. But for us, academic excellence and potential is not quite the same as simply having a long list of excellent publications or successful bids for research grants. And we recognize that not everyone has had the same opportunities, and some applicants will be further on in their careers than others. So, for example, we evaluate your publications relative to your career stage. And what we're really looking for is high quality publications in relevant journals, rather than simply a large number of publications. And as I said earlier, we're looking for well-developed research proposals that are likely to make a substantial and original contribution to your field. It's also really crucial that they fit closely with the theme that's set for that year. So a lot of the applications that we receive every year are not eligible because they don't really address the theme that is set. We also then want to see clear reasons for wanting to spend time in Cambridge. We don't ask for references as part of this application. This is because we've seen in our experience that references mean very different things in different countries. And we found that it doesn't give us a fair way of judging the merits of applicants. In some countries, it's usual to write 3 pages in a reference saying how wonderful the candidate is. In other countries, it's more usual to send 2 or 3 sentences, merely confirming that they are employed in that department. So we haven't asked for references as part of your application. I think it's important to say that we judge all applications on academic merit. But once we have a final shortlist, we may then apply a couple of other criteria. The first is that if we can, we want to give a fellowship to somebody who hasn't yet had a chance to travel much internationally before. Of course, there are some institutions in the Global South that do have high levels of funding to support research trips. But the aim of this programme is, wherever possible, to give an opportunity for someone who might not be able to come here otherwise. And the second criterion, as I mentioned before, is that we see a real value in bringing people together from different regions. So that means we're unlikely to appoint 3 scholars from the same continent. So that's something that we're going to bring into play when we consider that final shortlist. So now I'd like to ask if you have any questions. If you have any, please do click on the Q&A button and submit questions, and we'll do our very best to answer them. Zainab, do we have any questions coming in from anybody?
Yes, so I can see that one of the questions asks, are there any restrictions regarding career stage or discipline for applicants?
So discipline can be any discipline that falls within arts, social sciences, and humanities. Now, it could be also that your work bridges into sciences, engineering, that kind of thing as well. But as long as the main focus of it falls within arts, humanities, and social sciences, that is fine. And within that, as long as it's relevant to the theme, we would welcome as many different disciplines as possible. In terms of career stage, as I mentioned before, you need to have been awarded your PhD at least 5 years ago. The reason for this is that there are a number of other similar schemes that give opportunities to early career scholars. And we felt that there was a bit of a gap in the availability of schemes for people who've perhaps been teaching for a few years now, post their PhD, and could really do with a bit of extra time to develop their research. So that's our reasoning. But there's no upper limit in terms of when you might apply in terms of your career stage.
Perfect, thank you. Another question that we have is, at what time of the year is the theme for the following year announced?
So I think I'm right, Zainab, it's around October, isn't it, that we would, October or at the latest sort of early November, is that right? That we would open the scheme for the following year, and applications would then be due in February. So you've got a while to get an application together. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Another question that we have is, what are some of the common mistakes when applying?
Okay, common mistakes. Well, of course, the scheme is only in its third year. We've only done 2 selections rounds, so it's difficult to see any common mistakes. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is that we get a lot of applicants who clearly want to apply to come to CRASH, but don't necessarily take full notice of the theme. And unfortunately, that means that your application wouldn't be eligible. The other mistake, I think, would be to provide a research proposal that may be slightly related to the theme, but doesn't really fully address it. And that is something that the selection panel is really going to be looking at very closely.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Another question that we have is, how does CRASH facilitate collaboration and networking opportunities with researchers or institutions in Cambridge?
Okay, so this is talking about perhaps facilitating contacts with other researchers in Cambridge, etc., or beyond that. So I think one thing that we tend to do as soon as any visiting fellows arrive is to arrange a meeting with them where we talk about their goals for the term ahead, and we talk about the kind of contacts that they might want to make in other departments. And sometimes I'm able to suggest, have you met Professor X in sociology? Because I think they might be very interested in your work. And if I don't know personally, I might recommend that you go and talk to somebody else who might be able to provide some contacts. So we do think that's very important. We'll try and set that up. The other thing that we encourage people to do is just take part in a lot of seminars and events. In Cambridge, nearly always they're followed by some kind of drinks event, or they're over lunch, or there's coffee involved. So often there's a social element to our academic events, and that's a great chance to meet people.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to know more about the research practice seminars and how you expect the candidate to share their research.
Okay, that's a really good question, because actually the primary purpose of the research practice seminar isn't for the candidate to share their research, because that would happen as part of the joint event that we organise with you, where you'll get a chance to give a research presentation to everybody joining that event. The research practice seminars are a different kind of series, and they take place in CRASH every Thursday. And different people lead that seminar. And it's an opportunity to think about research methods, and there could be something to do with the politics of research or the ethics of research, or the future of a particular discipline, or a particular turn in a discipline that's affecting a lot of researchers. And we have a chance to read an article that's selected by the seminar leader, and then to discuss that. And it's one of my favorite events in CRASH, because we all bring very different disciplinary perspectives to bear on the question, but also very different regional perspectives. And that can make for a really interesting discussion.
That's great. Thank you. We've just got one question that's asking us to elaborate a little bit more about this year's theme.
Great. Okay, so this year's theme is science, politics, and justice. And we've kept it as wide as possible, because obviously any of those terms might evoke a number of different ideas in people. But we're partnering with the Department for History and Philosophy of Science, which is an extremely interesting department. They themselves are very interdisciplinary, as you can guess from the title. And they're doing a lot of work. They've got a number of people actually in the department who are already working on or in the Global South. And they're really hoping to bring together a number of people who are interested in questions of justice and politics as they relate to the history of science or the philosophy of science. And we're actually hoping that we might bring some philosophers and historians together. But it's also open to a number of other different disciplines, because a lot of people may be able to create a research proposal that has something that can speak really strongly to that theme. There's a little bit more about the theme on our website, if anybody wants to read in a bit more detail.
Perfect, that's great. There's a question just about the working hours and offices, office access for the visiting fellows. So I'm happy to answer this one.
Yeah.
fellows are encouraged to take full advantage of the collaborative workspace, and they'll have the flexibility to work remotely as and when needed. The visiting fellows will have 24/7 access to their desk space and workspace via their ID card. And while the office hours are typically 9 till 5 p.m., fellows are more than welcome to utilize the space during the evenings and weekends. It is worth noting, however, that the support staff, including IT and the reception services, are only available during the office hours, but there are contact numbers if needed. So,
Yeah. Thanks, Zainab. Yeah, there's actually a number of different spaces. I don't know, Victoria and Swati, what spaces you found best to work in, but there's quite a few. There's obviously the CRASSH space, but there's also different libraries, college, etc. Where did you find that you spent most of your time working?
Personally speaking, I spent most of my time in CRASH and beyond office hours as well, because I think once you get used to that space, it's again, though the Wolfson Library, again, it's very accessible if you're staying in Wolfson. I did not work a lot out of my room, though again, I should mention that the Wolfson single rooms also have sufficient space to work out of should you. I took some online classes from that space, for example. So yeah, but I mean, Cambridge is not lacking in spaces to work out of, if that's a concern. Wilson also has lounges where you can spend some time, though, at working if you want company. Though you should note that they can be noisy spaces, because again, students also hang out there.
Great, thank you, Victoria. Anything that you want to add to that?
I think the CRASSH space is actually very nice. It's a place I spent most of my time. I enjoyed the online library because you could actually access books from different sources. I also had time to visit the Center for African Studies library, which is very rich. You could also get some books there. I mean, anywhere you go to, Wilson College, CRASH, you are able to work. So in terms of being conducive, CRASH is a place to be, actually. It's a very nice place to work, very quiet and warm for research.
Thank you. Yeah, but I should say people are free to find wherever they would like to work. You're always very welcome at CRASH, but everyone can work in different libraries, different spaces that they find useful as well. Zainab, any more questions do we have coming in?
Yeah, we've got one more question. What advice would you give to prospective applicants to ensure that they can get the most out of the fellowship process and, yeah, the fellowship during their stay here?
Gosh, I think that is a question for Victoria and Swati, actually. What advice would you have to help people get the best out of their stay with us? Victoria, let's start with you. Anything that comes to mind?
Okay. Yeah. If it has to do with applying, I think just like Joanna said, it's good to look at the theme and make sure that your proposal is actually tailored towards what the theme is saying. That gives you an advantage. And of course, you're contributing something very new or something you're elaborating on some things that have been done in the past. All right. In terms of making the best of your time, I think it depends on why you want to come out in the first place. For me, I needed time to concentrate on research, basically. I just needed to break away from a lot of responsibilities. And so when I came to CRASH, it was a very good time for me to think. I could think about new research possibilities. I could think about ideas. I could learn from people. So attending the research practice seminar helps you it opens you up to many opportunities. I mean, research ideas. You could think of I'll give you an example. There's this guy that is working on this architecture thing. When he started talking about space, then I started thinking about space and gender. And I was able to write something on it after I left CRASH, but I got the idea. So there are things you could learn from other people collaborating with others. It's also good to, one thing I'm not very sure I made the most use of that I think you may want to do is to actually get to know people, extend your, expand your contacts. I did a little of that, but I'm sure I could have done better. So you could meet people, speak with them, get to know what they do, see how you could work with them. Everything is available at CRASSH. And I think that would help anybody's career. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. That sounds like fantastic advice. Swati, anything you'd like to add there?
So if this is I would make the assumption that if someone's qualified for the fellowship, or really, I'd say that you should be very clear about what are the things that you want to accomplish here. For me, it was very clear. I mean, I had a essay to write. I had some research materials to access, both in Cambridge as well as outside of Cambridge, and I had a few people to meet. So this was something that I had already listed for myself so that I could, place it accordingly. The British Library situation made things somewhat difficult, but I was mostly able to bypass it in other ways. So you should be planning ahead so that, because a term is a very short time at the end of the day, and you'll be overwhelmed enough in the early days and then focused in your work in the next few weeks, so that, and eventually you find that the time is over. Time passes very fast. So it's always useful to plan ahead with regards to the things you want to accomplish, where they are, be it in Cambridge or elsewhere, and plan out your timelines accordingly. As for everything else, I think making the most of Cambridge also includes things outside of your planned research, because it's a huge academic community. There's always something or the other going on, and it's good to explore that, good to meet people, listen to things, drop by. Everyone's welcoming. It's also good to simply experience life in the colleges and in the town itself. And I think I found that experience also very helpful, because our cluster was about environmental histories to an extent, and walking around the fence, etc., in some ways helped me think through the questions I was looking at. So I'd strongly advise anybody spending some time there to simply walk around and let your mind think, because it's very productive in some ways. At least that's what I found. Also a good way to beat the cold, I think. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, very good advice. Good. I think we're coming to the end of the questions now. If people have any other questions, though, you are always extremely welcome to email us at any stage. So if you go onto our website, you'll find the email address there of Zainab, our fellowships coordinator, and that's fellowships@crash.cam.ac.uk. It's on the website. Do contact with any inquiries that you might have. She will also pass on to me anything of a more academic nature, and I can get back to you as well. But please, our intention is that our selection process is as transparent as possible. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask us about them, they are more than welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. All the best with those of you who decide to apply, and we're looking forward to receiving your application soon. Thank you very much to Swati and Victoria as well, and Zainab for helping with the call.